Captain Mara Chen pressed her palm against the cold viewport, watching Earth shrink behind them. The blue marble that had cradled humanity for millions of years was now just another dot of light among billions. Around her ship, the Defiant Hope, thousands of other vessels drifted in a chaotic exodus. Some were proper colony ships. Others were hastily converted cargo haulers, passenger liners, even mining rigs. Anything that could hold people and fly had been pressed into service. 3 weeks ago, Kanda had delivered their judgment. Mara remembered watching the broadcast with the rest of humanity. 7 alien species, each represented by their finest diplomats, had stood in a semicircle. Devrin, tall and reptilian, had spoken first. Their translator box made their hissing sound almost gentle. Humanity has been evaluated. Your species shows dangerous tendencies. Your history is soaked in blood. Your technology advances too quickly, without wisdom to guide it. You are unpredictable, violent, and a threat to galactic peace. The other species had agreed. The crystalline shard, the insectoid krill, the gaseous luminari contained in their environmental suits. All 7 voted the same way. Humanity was guilty of the crime of being human. The edict of exile had been swift and brutal. Concordat warships appeared in orbit around Earth in every human colony. Their weapons could turn entire continents to glass, and everyone knew it. There would be no negotiation. There would be no appeal. Humanity had 1 month to evacuate everything they could carry and leave civilized space forever. Mara had been a commercial pilot before the exile. She had transported luxury goods between Earth and Mars, living a comfortable, boring life. Now she commanded a ship carrying 40,000 souls into the unknown. Most of them were asleep in cryopods, trying to conserve resources for the long journey ahead. The ones who remained awake were needed crew or simply couldn't afford a pod. Captain. The voice belonged to her first officer, David Reeves. He was a young man, barely 30, with dark circles under his eyes. Nobody had slept well in weeks. We're receiving the rendezvous coordinates. The Perseus Void. It's not good. Mara pulled up the star charts on her command console. The Perseus Void was a region on the galaxy's edge where stars went to die. Neutron stars, black holes, radiation storms that could fry electronics at 1,000 kilometers. No atmosphere-bearing planets. No asteroid belts rich in minerals. Nothing that could support life as they knew it. They're sending us there to die, David said quietly. Mara didn't answer. She knew he was right. The Concordat hadn't just exiled humanity. They had sentenced them to a slow, cold death among the stellar graveyard. But she wouldn't say it out loud. The crew needed hope, even if it was a lie. The comm system crackled to life. Other ships in the fleet were checking in, comparing damage, sharing supplies. Some had barely made it out of Earth's atmosphere. Others had lost entire sections to Concordat warning shots when they tried to salvage one more load of equipment. 12 billion humans were scattered across thousands of ships, and they were all heading into hell together. All vessels. This is Admiral Richard Chow on the New Horizon. The voice was old, but steady. Chow had been retired from the Earth Defense Force before the exile. Now he was the closest thing humanity had to a leader. I know you're scared. I know you're angry. I know some of you want to turn around and fight. Don't. The Concordat expects us to be stupid. They expect us to throw our lives away in a pointless battle. We won't give them that satisfaction. Mara listened as the Admiral continued. Our ancestors crossed oceans in wooden boats. They crossed continents in covered wagons. They crossed space in tin cans, held together with hope and math. We're going to do the same. The Perseus Void will be our home now. We'll make it work. We always do. The speech was good. It was exactly what people needed to hear. But Mara could hear the doubt underneath the words. Chow didn't believe they would survive either. He was just buying time, keeping people from panic behind them. The Concordat fleet maintained their distance, herding the human ships like sheepdogs, moving livestock. They weren't taking chances. Every few hours, a Concordat cruiser would fire a warning shot near any ship that strayed too far from the designated course. The message was clear: keep moving or die. Mara's daughter, Emily, appeared on the command deck carrying 2 cups of recycled coffee substitute. The girl was 16 and should have been worried about school and friends. Instead, she was learning how to operate ship systems and ration food supplies. The exile had stolen everyone's future. "Mom, the hydroponics bay is having issues again," Emily said, handing over 1 cup. "Chief Martinez says we might lose another section if we can't stabilize the temperature." More problems. There were always more problems. The Defiant Hope hadn't been designed for a multi-year voyage carrying 40,000 people. None of the ships had. They were running on borrowed time and patched together solutions. "Key, tell Martinez to do what he can," Mara said. "We'll figure it out." Through the viewport, Earth was now invisible among the stars. Mara felt something break inside her chest, a physical sensation like her heart cracking. She would never see her home world again. None of them would. Their children would grow up on ships, never feeling natural gravity or breathing unrecycled air. Their grandchildren might never see a living world at all. The Concordat had won. Humanity was finished, or so they thought. Mara didn't know it yet, but she was wrong about humanity being finished. The species that had climbed from caves to reach the stars wasn't going to die quietly in the void. They were going to do what they had always done when faced with extinction. They were going to survive, and then they were going to make sure nobody ever exiled them again. Dr. James Okonkwo floated through the laboratory module, checking readings on the radiation collectors. He had been born on the Defiant Hope 32 years ago, during the 3rd year of exile. His mother told him stories about Earth, about blue skies and green grass, but to James, those things were as mythical as dragons. The void was his home. The stars were his landscape. "Levels are spiking again," said his research partner, Lynn Torres. She was 2nd generation, like him, born on a different ship, but transferred here 5 years ago for the research program. "That neutron star is putting out more radiation than we calculated." James smiled. "Good. We need more, not less." Lynn gave him a concerned look. Talking about needing more radiation was the kind of thing that got you sent to the psychological evaluation team. But James knew what he was doing. Over the past 100 years, humanity had learned something the Concordat never imagined. The things that were killing them could also save them. The Perseus Void had been a death sentence, at first. Ships failed. People died from radiation sickness. Children were born with defects. The early years were a nightmare that James only knew from history files. But humans were stubborn creatures. They didn't accept death. They analyzed it, studied it, and found ways to beat it. The first breakthrough came 40 years into the exile. Engineers discovered that the exotic particles released by dying stars could be used to create shielding far superior to anything humanity had possessed before. What the Concordat thought was worthless cosmic garbage turned out to be the key to survival. The second breakthrough came 20 years later. Scientists learned to harvest the radiation itself, converting it into usable energy. Suddenly, the void wasn't a wasteland. It was an unlimited power source. James was working on a third breakthrough. If his calculations were correct, they could weaponize the radiation, create beams that would tear through any known shielding. The Concordat had exiled humanity to a region filled with the most dangerous energy in the galaxy. They were about to learn that danger cuts both ways. "Run the simulation again," James said. "I want to see if we can increase the focusing array efficiency." While Lynn worked, James looked out the laboratory viewport. In the distance, he could see the lights of other ships. The human fleet had changed over the decades. The desperate Exodus vessels had been retrofitted, rebuilt, and redesigned. Generation ships became mobile cities. Mining ships harvested neutron star material. Manufacturing vessels turned raw resources into new technology. Admiral Sarah Volkov had unified the scattered fleets 15 years ago, creating the Terran Remnant. It wasn't a government exactly, more like a military alliance with democratic elements. Everyone voted on major decisions, but the fleet admirals had authority during emergencies. And in the void, everything was an emergency. James's communicator beeped. It was his mother, Captain Mara Chen. She was old now, in her 80s, but still sharp. She had retired from commanding the Defiant Hope, but remained as an advisor to Admiral Volkov. James, are you seeing the sensor readings from Scout Group 7? He pulled up the data feed. Scout Group 7 had been doing long-range reconnaissance near the edge of Concordat space. They weren't supposed to be seen. They weren't supposed to be anywhere near the border, officially. I see it, James said. Concordat patrol ship. Looks like they stumbled onto our mining operation in the Kepler debris field. The scout ship is reporting the Concordat vessel is turning around. They saw us. James felt his heart rate increase. This was it. The moment they had all feared and anticipated. The Concordat knew humanity was still alive. Over the next few hours, James watched as the situation developed. The Concordat scout ship jumped away, presumably to report what it had found. Admiral Volkov called an emergency session of the Fleet Council. James listened to the audio feed while he worked. They know, someone said. It sounded like Captain Rodriguez of the Wanderer. They're going to come back with warships and finish what they started. Let them come, another voice replied. James recognized Admiral Petrov of the Russian fleet section. We're not the same humans they exiled. Let them see what we've become. Admiral Volkov's calm voice cut through the argument. Everyone quiet. We don't know what they'll do yet. Maybe they'll ignore the report. Maybe they'll think it was a sensor error. Humans are supposed to be dead, after all. But James knew better. He had studied the Concordat species extensively. They were bureaucratic and thorough. They would investigate. And when they did, they would find that humanity had not only survived, but thrived in conditions that should have been impossible. The meeting continued for hours. Some wanted to retreat deeper into the void. Others wanted to prepare for war. A few suggested trying to make contact, to negotiate. James listened to all of it, while his hands continued working on the radiation weapon prototype. Finally, his mother's voice came through. What does the science division recommend? James activated his communicator. We continue as planned. Our technology is advancing faster than anyone predicted. In another 50 years, maybe less, we'll be ready to return to civilized space. Not as refugees begging for permission, as equals demanding respect. 50 years is a long time, someone said. Humanity spent 200,000 years learning to farm, James replied. We can wait 50 more to become the strongest power in the galaxy. The council eventually agreed. They would maintain their current course, expand carefully, develop their technology, and most importantly, stay hidden. The Concordat Scouts report would be investigated, but if humanity was careful, they could make it look like an isolated incident. After the call ended, James returned to his work. Lynn had finished the simulation. The results made him smile. It works, she said, quietly. The weapon works. We can punch through Concordat shielding like it's tissue paper. Tease nodded. He thought about the alien species that had cast out humanity, that had condemned billions to death in the void. They thought humans were dangerous 100 years ago. They thought humanity's violence and unpredictability made them a threat. They had no idea. The humans who left civilized space had been merchants and miners, farmers and artists, business people and bureaucrats. The humans who would return would be void-born, forged in radiation and vacuum, raised on stories of exile and survival. They would return with technology the Concordat couldn't match and a unity the 7 species had never achieved. James looked at his reflection in the viewport. His dark skin was marked with the faint scars that all void-born carried, reminders of the harsh environment they called home. His eyes were harder than his mother's generation, adapted to the strange light of dying stars. "Save the data," he told Lynn, "and then run it again. Make it better. We have time." Time was the one thing humanity had learned to use. In the void, rushing meant dying. Patience meant survival. And revenge, when it came, would be a dish served after a century of preparation. The Concordat would learn that exiling humanity wasn't mercy. It was the biggest mistake in galactic history. Commander Elijah Torres moved through the shadows of the Concordat trade station like a ghost. His suit was equipped with adaptive camouflage that bent light around him, making him nearly invisible. The technology was based on Luminari environmental suits, reverse-engineered and improved by human scientists. The Concordat had shared their knowledge freely when humanity was part of galactic civilization. Now that knowledge was being used against them. Behind him, 3 other phantoms followed in perfect silence. They were the best of humanity's special forces, trained from childhood in the skills needed to move unseen through alien territory. Each one had spent years studying Concordat languages, cultures, and security systems. They knew the enemy better than the enemy knew themselves. The mission today was simple. Plant a small device on the station's main communication relay. The device would introduce tiny errors into data transmissions. Nothing obvious, just enough to cause confusion. A shipping manifest would have one wrong number. A military deployment order would be sent to the wrong sector. Small mistakes that would compound over time. This was humanity's strategy now. 200 years after the exile, the Terran remnant had begun its long game. They weren't launching attacks. They weren't making demands. They were gently, carefully, pushing the Concordat toward collapse. From within, Elijah reached the relay room and disabled the security sensors. His team's technical specialist, a woman named Sarah Kim, moved forward and opened the access panel. Her hands worked quickly, installing the device in less than 30 seconds. Nobody would find it unless they tore apart the entire relay. And why would they? Nothing appeared to be wrong. "Package delivered," Sarah whispered into the com. Extracting now. They retraced their path through the station, avoiding the few maintenance workers still on duty at this hour. Elijah had memorized every patrol route, every camera, blind spot, every locked door, override code. The Phantoms had been operating in Concordat space for 20 years now, and they had only lost 2 teams in all that time, back on their stealth ship, hidden in the debris field outside the station. Elijah removed his helmet and breathed recycled air that tasted like home. Captain Jung Wei, their mission coordinator, nodded approval. "Good work. That makes 47 relays we've compromised in the Vin Empire sector. Combined with the work other teams are doing in Cortax space, we should start seeing results within a year." Elijah pulled up the strategic map on the command display. Red dots marked every Concordat system. Yellow dots showed human infiltration points. Blue lines indicated trade routes they had subtly disrupted. Green zones were regions where they had successfully planted misinformation through compromised news networks. The map told a story. The Concordat was fracturing. The 7 species that had united to exile humanity were now turning on each other. Economic disputes between the Vren Empire and the Cortax Federation had escalated over the past decade. The Krill hive worlds were demanding more representation in the Concordat Council. The shard crystalline entities were withdrawing into isolation, claiming the other species were too primitive to understand their philosophy. None of it was accidental. Every dispute had been carefully encouraged by human agents. Every insult that sparked diplomatic incidents had been whispered by phantom operatives. Every trade deal that failed had been sabotaged by perfectly timed technical glitches. The Concordat thought they were experiencing natural political evolution. They didn't realize they were being herded toward civil war. "Sir, "We have incoming data from Intelligence Division," Sarah said. "Looks like Observer Corps has new information." The Observer Corps was another branch of humanity's shadow operations. While the Phantoms handled active missions, the Observers simply watched and recorded. They had agents embedded in Concordat society at every level. Some were humans using advanced disguise technology. Others were aliens who had been recruited, bribed, or blackmailed into cooperation. The report that came through made Elijah smile. A young Krill intelligence officer named Zixstar had filed a report with his superiors about unusual patterns in shipping data and communication errors. He suspected someone was manipulating Concordat systems. "Smart," Captain Zhang said. "Should we eliminate him?" Elijah shook his head. "No. Let him keep investigating. His superiors will dismiss him as paranoid. The more he insists something is wrong, the less credible he becomes. Happens every time," was true. Over the past 20 years, dozens of Concordat officials had noticed anomalies. Some had even correctly guessed that someone was sabotaging their systems, but without evidence, and with their own species embroiled in political conflicts, nobody listened. The reports were filed away and forgotten. Meanwhile, humanity prepared. In the Perseus Void, the Terran remnant had grown into a proper civilization. The generation ships had been transformed into massive space habitats, each one home to millions. Shipyards produced vessels with technology decades ahead of Concordat designs. Training academies graduated soldiers who had spent their entire lives preparing for the day. They would reclaim humanity's place in the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Volkov, now in her 70s, commanded a fleet of over 10,000 warships. Each one was equipped with weapons that could tear apart Concordat vessels in seconds, shields that could withstand sustained bombardment, engines that could outrun anything the 7 species could field. But Volkov wasn't ready to reveal humanity's strength yet. The Phantoms would continue their work. The Observers would keep watching, and the Concordat would keep tearing itself apart, never realizing they were being guided toward destruction by the species they had tried to exterminate. Elijah thought about his grandmother, who had been among the original exiles. She had died when he was young, but he remembered her stories about Earth, about the blue skies and the feeling of natural gravity. She had cried when she told him those stories, mourning a world she would never see again. His generation didn't mourn. They prepared. They trained. They waited. And they remembered every detail of the exile. Every ship that had been destroyed by Concordat warning shots. Every child who had died from radiation sickness in the early years. Every indignity and hardship that humanity had endured. The Concordat thought the exile was ancient history. 200 years was a long time for species that lived short lives and had short memories. But humans remembered. They always remembered. And they were very, very patient when it came to revenge. As target, Sarah asked. Elijah pulled up the mission list. There were hundreds of operations planned for the coming months, each one small and insignificant by itself. Together, they would topple an empire. Kordak's military supply depot, he said. "We're going to make sure their munitions inventory gets corrupted. When they go to war with the Vren, they'll find out half their weapons aren't where the computers say they should be." "When, not if?" Captain Zhang asked. "When," Elijah confirmed. "The Vren ambassador is going to receive a very insulting message tomorrow. A message that will be traced back to the Korthax diplomatic corps. Neither side will believe it was a mistake." They had been setting up this particular domino for 3 years, planting evidence, establishing patterns, building tensions. Tomorrow, the first piece would fall. Within months, the 2 largest Concordat powers would be at war. The other 5 species would be forced to choose sides. And when the Concordat was divided and weak, when their fleets were scattered and their economies strained, that's when humanity would emerge from the void. Not as refugees, begging for mercy, as conquerors offering terms. Elijah looked at the stars through the viewport. Somewhere out there, the Concordat species were going about their lives, unaware that their civilization was crumbling. They thought they were safe. They thought the human threat had been eliminated centuries ago. They were wrong. Humanity was coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Varian Empire and the Corthax Federation had been at war for 2 years when Fleet Admiral Marcus Jong gave the order humanity had been waiting 2 centuries to hear. All ships, prepare for jump. We're going home from the bridge of the massive dreadnought Vindication. Marcus watched as 10,000 human warships powered up their engines. Around them, the Perseus void glowed with dying stars and cosmic radiation that had once threatened to kill humanity. Now it powered their civilization and armed their weapons. Marcus was 4th-generation Voidborn. His great-grandmother had been Captain Mara Chen of the Defiant Hope. She had died 20 years ago, but not before seeing humanity transform from desperate refugees into the most advanced military force in the galaxy. Marcus carried her old captain's insignia in his pocket, a reminder of where humanity had come from. "Sir, all fleet groups reporting ready," his tactical officer reported. Commander Jessica Hart was young but brilliant, trained in void combat tactics that no Concordat species had ever conceived. Stealth systems online. Long-range sensors detecting Concordat military activity in 7 sectors. They're scattered, fighting each other, exactly as planned. The Phantoms and Observers had done their work well. The Concordat alliance had shattered. The Vrin and Cortax were destroying each other over territory. The Krill had sided with the Vrin. The Shard had withdrawn completely. The other 3 species were trying to stay neutral, but getting drawn in despite their efforts. Galactic civilization was tearing itself apart. And now humanity would step into the chaos. Open a channel. All frequencies. I want every species in the galaxy to hear this. Marcus stood and straightened his uniform. Behind him, the Vindication's bridge crew worked in perfect coordination. These were the best humanity had to offer. Engineers who could keep a ship running through impossible conditions. Tactical officers who had studied every known combat scenario. Scientists who had pushed the boundaries of physics beyond what anyone thought possible. This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Jong of the Terran Remnant, broadcasting to all Concordat systems and allied species. 205 years ago, you cast us out. You judged humanity too dangerous to exist among civilized species. You exiled us to the Perseus void to die. You forgot about us. We did not forget about you. He paused, letting the words sink in across countless worlds. We survived your death sentence. We thrived in the void you thought was uninhabitable. We built a civilization stronger than anything you possess. And now we return, not as refugees begging for acceptance, but as equals demanding respect. Marcus gestured, and the tactical display showed human fleet positions. Our ships surround your core systems. Our weapons are trained on your military installations. But we are not here for conquest. We are here to offer peace. The old Concordat is dead, torn apart by the same fear and paranoia that led you to exile us. We propose something better. A new federation, built on mutual respect and strength, where all species stand as equals. Stand with us or stand aside, but do not stand against us. You tried that once. It did not end well for anyone. He cut the transmission and sat down. Around the bridge, the crew waited in tense silence. Everything depended on how the Concordat species responded. Some outcomes led to peace. Others led to war. Marcus was prepared for both. The first response came from the Krill hive world of Chittix Prime. The insectoid intelligence officer Sixstar had been promoted over the past few years, despite his warnings about human infiltration being ignored. Now he was part of the Krill diplomatic corps. This is Speaker Sixstar of the Krill Unity. We acknowledge your message, Terran Remnant. We request diplomatic talks. We were wrong about humanity. We see that now. Haka smiled. The krill had always been the most practical of the concordat species. They recognized reality when it stared them in the face. Others would be more stubborn. Indeed, the Vren Empire's response was hostile. Human fleet, you have violated concordat space. Withdraw immediately or face military action. Sir, Vren Battle Group, moving to intercept, Commander Hart reported. 30 ships, Empire-class, cruisers, and destroyers. They're taking an aggressive formation. Let them come within weapons range. Then demonstrate our superiority. Target their engines and shields only. I want prisoners, not casualties. The battle lasted 7 minutes. Human ships moved with precision that the Vren couldn't match. Weapons that harvested radiation from dying stars tore through concordat shielding like paper. Advanced targeting systems disabled enemy vessels without destroying them. When it was over, all 30 Vren ships were adrift, their crews alive but helpless. Broadcast disengagement to all concordat systems, Marcus ordered. Make sure they understand. We could have killed them. We chose not to. Violence is not our goal. Over the next few weeks, more battles followed. Each time, human forces demonstrated overwhelming technological superiority. Each time, they offered generous surrender terms. Each time, more concordat systems chose to negotiate rather than fight. The Korvax Federation, desperate in losing their war with the Vren, were the next to seek alliance. Then 3 of the smaller concordat species, the shard crystalline entities, sent a message, saying they found humanity's evolution fascinating and wished to study them further, which was apparently their version of approval. Only the Vren Empire held out, too proud to admit defeat. Their emperor, an ancient reptilian called Veshrath, refused all diplomatic contacts. He called for total war against humanity, demanding the other species honor their ancient alliance. Nobody listened. The concordat was finished. Marcus met with Zixthar and representatives from other species on a neutral station. The krill officer's compound eyes studied him with something that might have been respect. He planned this, Zixthar said. For years, you manipulated us, pushed us toward conflict, weakened us from within. Marcus didn't deny it. You exiled us. You tried to kill us. Did you think we would forget? Did you think we would forgive? And now, what happens to us? Now we build something better. The Terran Federation will replace the Concordat. All species will have representation, but humanity leads. Our technology will be shared. Our protection will extend to all member worlds. But there will be rules. No species exiles another. No species commits genocide. No species stands above the law. And if we refuse, Marcus leaned back in his chair. Then you stand alone while the galaxy moves forward. Your choice. One by one, the Concordat species agreed. Some genuinely saw the benefit of alliance with humanity. Others simply recognized they had no other option. The old order was dead. The new order was being born. Only Emperor Veshrath continued to resist. He gathered what remained of the Vren military and prepared for a last stand at their home world. Marcus took the Vindication and 50 ships to finish it. The battle for Vren Prime was the bloodiest of the return. The Vren fought with desperate courage, defending their homeworld with everything they had. But courage wasn't enough against 2 centuries of technological advancement. Human ships carved through the Vren defenses. Marcus stood on the bridge, watching explosions light up the planet's orbital space. He felt no joy in the destruction, no triumph in the victory, just a tired satisfaction that it was almost over. Sir, Emperor Veshrath is hailing us, Commander Hart said. Audio only. Put him through. The Emperor's voice was old and defeated. You have won, human. Take your victory. But know this, we were right to fear you. Your species is dangerous, uncontrollable. You will bring chaos to the galaxy. Quanus thought about his great-grandmother, watching Earth disappear as humanity was driven into exile. He thought about the generations who had died in the void, struggling to survive in conditions that should have killed them. He thought about the long patience, the careful planning, the absolute determination to make sure this could never happen again. "Perhaps you were right to fear us," Marcus said quietly, "but you were wrong to cast us out. You should have worked with us. Instead, you created the very threat you feared. Congratulations, Emperor. You played yourself." He cut the transmission and gave the final order. "Disable their planetary shields. Marines, prepare for landing. Let's end this." Within a day, the Varen homeworld had surrendered. Emperor Veshrath was taken into custody. The war was over. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy belonged to them now. President Amara Ase stood at the podium overlooking the Grand Assembly Hall, looking out at representatives from 23 different species. Humans sat alongside Krill, Vryn, Korthax, Shard, and others. Some wore environmental suits. Others breathed the same air she did. All of them were here because humanity had dragged them into a new age, whether they wanted it or not. 5 years had passed since Admiral Zhang's fleet emerged from the Perseus Void. 5 years since the old Concordat collapsed and the Terran Federation rose to replace it. The transition had been messy, complicated, and sometimes violent, but they had done it. A new galactic order had been born. Amara was the first president of Earth since the exile. She had been born on the generation ship New Beijing, never seeing a planet until she was 30 years old. Now she stood on humanity's homeworld, restored after 2 centuries of abandonment. The Concordat had left Earth mostly intact, thinking humans would never return. They had been wrong about that, just as they had been wrong about everything else. Representatives of the Terran Federation, Amara began, her voice carried by translators to every species present. "We gather here to mark 5 years of peace and cooperation. 5 years since we chose partnership over conflict. 5 years since we proved that different species can work together when they treat each other with respect." In the audience, Sixthar of the Krill clicked his mandibles in what humans had learned was approval. The insectoid had become humanity's strongest alien ally, helping bridge the gap between human and Concordat cultures. Other species had been slower to accept the new order, but even they were coming around. Not everyone was happy, of course. In the back rows, Amara could see the Varen delegation. They sat in rigid silence, their reptilian faces unreadable. Emperor Veshrath was imprisoned for war crimes, but his people remained bitter about their defeat. Some Varen talked about rebellion, about reclaiming their lost glory. But talk was cheap, and everyone knew humanity's military could crush any uprising before it started. "I know some of you resent what has happened," Amara continued, looking directly at the Varen. "You feel that humanity has taken what was yours, that we have imposed our will on the galaxy through force. You are not entirely wrong. We did use our military superiority to establish this federation. We did demand respect rather than ask for it. But I ask you to consider the alternative." She pulled up a holographic display showing Concordat space 5 years ago. The image was ugly. War, destruction, species fighting species, trade routes collapse, civilian casualties in the millions. The old Concordat had been tearing itself apart. "This was your galaxy before we returned. This was the peace and prosperity you built after exiling us. How many more years would the war have lasted? How many more would have died? The Concordat was finished. Someone was going to fill the power vacuum. Would you have preferred the Korthax military dictatorship, the Krill hive mind expansion, or perhaps total anarchy as every system fought for itself?" Silence from the Vin delegation. They had no answer because there was no answer. Humanity had conquered a galaxy that was already destroying itself. They had imposed order on chaos. That the order benefited humans most of all was just how power worked. "We are not perfect," Amara said, softening her tone. Humanity has made mistakes in these 5 years. We have been too aggressive in some areas, too lenient in others. We are learning how to govern a multi-species civilization, just as you are learning how to be governed by former outcasts. It is awkward for everyone, but we are making progress. She highlighted several joint projects on the display. Human krill exploration vessels mapping the galactic core. For human research stations developing new medical technology. Cortlax engineers working with human scientists to terraform marginal worlds. Small signs of cooperation, but they were growing. The question before us today is not about the past. We cannot change what happened. The question is about the future. What kind of galaxy do we want to build? One where might makes right and the strong dominate the weak. Or one where strength is used to protect rather than oppress. Amara smiled slightly. I prefer the second option, and I think most of you do too. After the speech, she met with various delegations in private sessions. The krill wanted to discuss trade agreements. The shark wanted to propose a cultural exchange program. Even some of the smaller species that had barely participated in concordat politics were now engaging actively in Federation affairs. The Vren delegation was last. They were led by Ambassador Kesvar, a younger female who had opposed Emperor Veshrath's war. She had survived the purges that followed the defeat and now spoke for her people. President Usay Kesbar began formally. My people wish to discuss the terms of our membership in the Federation. You want renegotiation, Amara said. It wasn't a question, Case. The terms imposed after the war were harsh. Reparations, military restrictions, mandatory technology sharing. We understand why these were necessary then, but 5 years have passed. We have complied with every requirement. We ask for consideration. Amara had expected this. The Vren were proud. They hated being treated as conquered subjects. Eventually, that resentment would explode if not addressed. Better to release the pressure gradually. What specific changes do you propose? They talked for an hour. Amara agreed to reduce some military restrictions if the Vren increased civilian cooperation. She offered to phase out reparations over 10 years if the Vren government implemented democratic reforms. Small concessions that cost humanity little, but gave the Vren room to regain their dignity. Thank you, President, Kesvar said, finally. This is more than we expected. I'm not your enemy, Ambassador. None of us are enemies anymore. We're partners in building something new. But partnerships require trust, and trust requires time. Show me your people can be trusted, and the restrictions will continue to ease. After Kesvar left, Amara's chief of staff, Michael Adami, entered the office. He had been born on Earth after the Restoration, part of the first generation to grow up on humanity's homeworld in over 2 centuries. The Vren will test those concessions, he said. They'll push boundaries to see what they can get away with. I know, but we have to give them hope that things can improve. Otherwise, we're just creating another exile situation, and we know how that ends. Michael nodded. Speaking of which, I have news from the Perseus Void. The memorial is complete. Amara felt something tighten in her chest. The memorial. A massive structure built in the void where humanity had nearly died. It listed every name of every person who had perished during the exile years. Millions of names carved into synthetic diamond that would last forever. My grandmother's name is on that memorial, Amara said, quietly. She was 8 when the exile happened. She died at 37 from radiation sickness. Never saw Earth, never breathed unrecycled air. Her entire life was spent suffering because the Concordat was afraid of us, and now we ruled the galaxy. Now we try to do better than they did. That's all we can do. The following week, Amara traveled to the Perseus Void for the memorial dedication. She wasn't alone. Thousands of humans made the pilgrimage, along with representatives from other species. Even some Vren came, including Ambassador Kesvar. The memorial floated in space, illuminated by the light of a neutron star. It was beautiful and terrible, a reminder of both humanity's suffering and survival. Amara read some of the names aloud during the ceremony. Her grandmother, Admiral Zhao, who had held the fleet together in the early days, Dr. Martinez, who had solved the hydroponics crisis, thousands of others who had given everything so humanity could live. We remember them, Amara said, her voice broadcast across the void. We remember what they sacrificed. We remember why they died. And we promise that no species will ever suffer this fate again. Not under our watch. Not in our galaxy. After the ceremony, she found herself floating in an observation pod with Commander Lisa Chen, the great-great-granddaughter of Captain Mara Chen. Lisa was young, barely 30, and commanded an exploration vessel called the Wandering Star. Mixed crew, human and alien, heading toward the galactic core to map unexplored systems. Do you think they'd be proud of us? Lisa asked, looking at the memorial, the exiled generation. Do you think they'd approve of what we've become? Amara thought about it. I think they'd be relieved we survived, proud that we thrived. Maybe a little concerned about how we've used our power, but mostly I think they'd be happy we're still here. That was all they really wanted, for humanity to continue. And now we're bringing everyone else along with us. Yes, because that's what makes us different from the Concordat. They tried to eliminate threats. We turned threats into partners. They ruled through fear. We rule through strength and cooperation. Not perfect, but better. Lisa smiled. My next mission is a 3-year expedition. 5 ships, crews from 6 different species. We're going to map trade routes and scout for habitable worlds. The Krill Navigator says there are rumors of another civilization beyond the core. Maybe another threat. Maybe another opportunity. And you're excited about it. Terrified, actually. But yes, also excited. The galaxy is huge, President. We've only explored a fraction of it. Who knows what's out there? Amara watched the young commander's enthusiasm and felt hope. This was the generation that would truly build the Terran Federation. They hadn't experienced the exile. They hadn't suffered under Concordat prejudice. They saw aliens as colleagues and potential friends rather than enemies. Maybe that was the real victory, not the military conquest or the political dominance, but the fact that young humans could look at the galaxy and see possibility instead of threat. Good luck, Commander Chen. Make your great-great-grandmother proud. Lisa saluted and pushed off toward her ship. Amara watched her go, then turned back to the memorial. The names glowed softly in the starlight. Millions of humans who had died so billions could live. They had cast out humanity, thinking it would solve their problems. Instead, they had created something stronger than they could imagine. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, not through cruelty or oppression, but through simple, stubborn refusal to die when everyone expected them to, from survivors to rulers of the galaxy. It had taken 2 centuries, but humanity had completed the journey, and they were just getting started.